Good afternoon and welcome everyone who's joining today's webinar. It's about the Mercedes Benz common faults diagnosis and repair strategies. Before anything else, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Albert. I'm the Mercedes Benz technical support for Opus IVS Autologic. I've been with the company for the last 3 years now. So the topic for today is about strategies, how to diagnose, and some of the common issues for diesel engines. Just to remind everybody that the chat bar is on the right side corner. If you have some questions, that I will answer it to the best I can at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. Diagnosis strategy is very common to all those who are really dealing with the customer, which is very important to gain more information from the customer about the complaint, the cause, and the correction. So on this the webinar, I will be discussing some of the guidelines or techniques on how to check the cause, the complaint, the cause, and the correction of a certain vehicle. So where to start? Again, this is my background for my presentation for today. Like what I said, I've been with the Autologic for the past 3 years. So if you have any question, just type it in and I will answer them at the end. So the starting point of the diagnostic path is very important. So if the diagnostic path taken is rushed or not enough quality information is obtained, at this point, it can lead to wrong diagnosis. So it's very important, especially those people who are dealing with the customer, service advisors, workshop foreman, or even the technician itself. So the purpose of this information is to equip you with the knowledge and the process to perform diagnosis path to follow and with dealing with the problems. So more information from the customer, more information of the complaint, the better. First thing is the complaint. So there are 3 C's used as a practical application for the diagnosis guide. The first one is the complaint, or the complaint analysis from the customer, to create a starting point for the troubleshooting. And your goal is to obtain maximum possible information regarding the complaint. And here is ask the customer what, how, when, how often was the actual customer complaint. So the more information you ask the customer, the better. So tips and practical information, ask the customer, and then road test with the customer or the owner if possible. Test function yourself if the complaint is really there, and look through service technical information, or if there's any troubleshooting guide that you can get, and retrieve the freeze frame data and check for other similar faults. And the most key question is, what is the complaint exists? Which source information do I have available? And how do I check the complaint? In some cases, the customer will just give a call and then, or just leave the car without any information from the customer. So really the best important thing is to ask the customer itself. And if you can test drive it with the customer, and then that will be the best thing to do. and then test it by yourself. So, question to the customer: when and under what circumstances did the problem occur? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it on the driving condition? Is it stationary? Is it while driving slow speed, under load? Something like that. More information from the customer will be easier for us to diagnose the complaint. So were there any prior indications which were recognizable? If the car been in an accident, or is there any repair done before? Like on the third one, have repairs been carried out in the vehicle recently? Has any fitting or conversion work has been carried out in the vehicle or equipment retrofit, aftermarket parts that may cause the complaint? And then, is there any fault, or is the fault always present, or does it occur only sporadically or intermittently? Is the vehicle operated in any exceptional condition? Maybe the car has been towing a boat or any big trailer. So those are the most important aspects that we have to consider when we are diagnosing a complaint. So the sub-level or subsector and function level. This information is based on the dealer point of view. So if you have the workshop information, that's your practical information. You can check. You have any diagnosis manual, wiring diagram, or block diagrams, service information, diagnostic tester, and based also to your own experience, and of course with the help of other colleagues if they have encountered this kind of issues before. So these are the key questions. Which subsectors are necessary for the function, how they are related in terms of the function, and then which sector might have something to do with my problem. So these are all the aim is to assign the fault to a subsector. So it will narrow down your diagnosis. So test level. So these are the tools normally used to locate and pinpoint the fault. And your goal is to aim a verifiable test result. And these are all the tips and practical information that you can use, like as before. So you have to use any available tools or tester in the workshop. This is only an example. What do you need to do when you locate or pinpoint the fault codes or the complaint? The next C is the cause. So to avoid a repeated occurrence of the fault, that's the main, and the objective is to become familiar with the cause of the fault, because in some cases we just know, we know the complaint, but we didn't know the cause. For example, a blown fuse. Just a simple example is a blown fuse. Let's say a fuel pump fuse or air suspension fuse that's been blown, and then we just fix a new fuse, problem solved. But we didn't know why the fuse was blown. Is there any open circuit or short circuit? In some cases, if the fuse blown again, put another big fuse with a bigger amperage. So it will just hide you the cause of the problem, but not rectifying the problem itself. So tips and practical information, like what I've said, it could be an electrical overload, exceptional operating conditions, under warm or cold, incorrect operation, incorrect parameterization, incorrect coding, and wear and tear, software error, or design related. That could be some of the causes of the complaint. So your quick questions: what might be responsible for the fault, and which circumstances could have caused the fault code? And the last C is the correction of the fault. So in order to recreate the specified state of the vehicle, the aim, your goal is to conduct a professional repair. So again, how do I carry out the repair? What are the effects which result from the repair? And how do I check whether the complaint or cause is rectified? So these are the practical information which you needed for the correction of the fault. If you have any repair manual, work instruction, based on your own experience and the experiences of colleagues, and then parameterization and coding, and operational check and road test. So these are the 3 C's, which are the key or the main thing for a good diagnostic repair or professional repair. We don't have to go to the cause, a complaint, and then just the correction. We have to find the cause, and then so we have a good correction of fault, and then you can carry out a professional repair. So this slide is regarding looking on the diagnostic techniques, which is also very helpful for us technicians in the workshop. Like what I've mentioned before, speak to the driver or owner if necessary to get a better understanding of when this fault occurs. In most occasions, huge amounts of time can be saved even before connecting to the vehicle with a diagnostic tool or autologic tool. So the big picture, then ask the customer, look on the job card, verify the fault yourself, road test it if necessary, and do a full vehicle scan if necessary. So these are the main routine normally when the car came into the workshop. So ask. That's the most important thing. Have communication with the customer or with the owner. Gather more information. It will make your job quite easier and quicker, and then it will be time saving as well. So these are also the procedures. So how do we deal with day-to-day basis on the cases that we receive? So what's written on the job card? Have a brief look at the complaint of the vehicle, then check for ECU, check for live data, check for fault freeze frame data, check for actual values, and then call us if partial information about the concern. So take note of this portion here. It will also be helpful for us, autologic technical support, to provide the following full quick test result and live data screenshot if possible. So it will be easier for us to give you a precise answer when we give you a call. Okay, we will start now with the first engine, which is very common to most sedan cars and MLs and sprinters. So just to give you an idea, the specification for this particular engine, which is a family of inline 4-cylinder. This is only a basic example of this 651 engine, because it could be an earlier variant or it could be a later variant. Just to give you an idea, the most common issues of this 651 engine on a Mercedes Benz vehicle. Most common fault as per this engine 651 is the boost pressure deviates for the specified value. Customer complaint of engine warning light is on, and then engine is under boost. So that's the main complaint of the car. After you clear the fault code, the engine light will come on, but sometimes the fault code disappear. But still, customer complained about the boost pressure and there is no power on the vehicle, especially under load. So normally, the first thing we have to do is to check for any leaks. If there's any split hoses for the intercooler hoses, and then check all your live data for the boost pressure side. And if it's all on the specs and you can't find any air leak in the system, the next step really is to check visually what is the condition of the intercooler hoses. Because in some cases, there will be only small piece, small slit or small cut on the intercooler hoses that you can see. But on this particular fault code, what I encountered mostly, especially on the Sprinter van, is this one, which I know some of you who are watching this webinar might encountered already this type of complaint. But bear in mind, I have seen only these cases only for Sprinter vans, not on a sedan or SUVs, mostly on a Sprinter van vehicle with a 651 engine. And most of the complaint also, while driving on a flat surface, sometimes the fault will not come back or will not light the engine warning light on. Under load, under certain road condition, uphill under load, the light will come on. And in some cases, you can hear a hissing sound in the engine area. And that's the issue there, is the bolt for the intake manifold snaps. What I'm thinking, it could be the possibility the engine vibrates, and that's the reason why the bolt for the intake manifold snaps. And mostly it happens in between cylinder 1 and 2. It's a little bit tricky to check this kind of issue, because I know that most of you know the design of the engine. It's very hard to locate that broken bolt. So the first thing I normally do is, you have a plexi camera that you can poke under the intake manifold, and if you can see a black spot or black markings around that area, 90% that your bolt is already snapped for this one. I know it's not a very big, easy job, because especially in a Sprinter, and lots of parts to be removed before you can see exactly where the bolt is broken. So first thing really, I normally advise the customer, if you have a plexi camera, that you can locate that part there, and you can see a black spot or black soot around that area, there's a possibility that the bolt is already snapped. Next common issue for this 651 engine is the coolant leak. And these are the common points when you have a coolant loss in the system and pressurize it. These are the most common leakage point. And in some area, this is one of the worst spot that you can see. And as if you have noticed, this is a wrong coolant as well. They put a green coolant. Obviously, there's a leak in that area. And this also one of the photos that I have during my time in the dealership. If you have a coolant loss, that part will be soaked with coolant. And the reason is that seal ring on the oil filter housing splits. So the rectification is to replace the whole fuel filter housing cover. And that's where the O-ring is located. Another common issue with this 651 engine is the pressure sensor. I didn't put the fault code because there are different fault codes that relates to that differential pressure sensor. But the most common one is the faulty sensor that shows on the quick test report. And in the latest version of the 651 engine, it's more on the plug connection of this sensor, which the resistance is getting high. And then there is a repair method to replace the harness itself to rectify that the differential pressure sensor fault. Bear in mind also, in some cases, only the vacuum hoses which are not fitted properly. If you can notice, there are two types of hoses there, one small and one big. And I always recommend don't put that screw type hose clamp, because in some cases it will, if you over tighten that one, it's either you damage the hose or you damage this fitting. It's only made of plastic. 651 repair kit. I don't know if any one of you have encountered this kind of issue, but as per the dealership, during the first launch of this 651 engine, they have a recall or service measure as per production date and as per VIN number, that they have to replace all the injectors, all the fittings, and even the engine harness, engine control unit. And after that, they will program the engine control module to the latest software, and they will adjust all the injector values. If you have encountered with this type of issue, let's say an engine misfire or injector issue, and especially on an earlier version of Mercedes Benz, if you can send me the VIN number, or we will check it. If you can call the dealer and check it, if it is still having an outstanding service measure regarding the injector recall. You can just provide them the VIN number, and from there they will see if there will be still an outstanding measure for the injectors and engine control unit to be replaced. Okay, the next type of engine that we normally always encountered in the workshop is this V6 diesel. It's mostly on a SUVs, MLs, GLs, even on the old E-Class, and also on CLKs. So this engine is well known to everybody, and I know that most people deal with this car or with this type of engine encountered a lots of issues. So on this webinar, I'll be discussing some of the most common ones that you might have encountered as well. So to give you an idea what will be the rectification. First thing, normally that I receive with this kind of fault codes, the issue is the engine is lacking of power. As you have noticed, there are different parts that's been involved here. Inlet port shut-off motor, EGR positioner, intake temperature sensor, which is part of the MS, and all are short circuit to ground. Engine light on and lack of power. These, I think in 10 cases, let's say, or 12 cases or 20 cases, half of it having shown this kind of this fault code on an ML164 with this V6 engine. Another one, same thing with these fault codes, all the sensors, and even one glow time output stage, which is the glow plug relay. The issue there is, sorry, the cost will be because of this one. Torn seal on the tubo area, the rubber seal. That's the cause. And then it will drip the oil going to your inlet port shaft motor. Another sign of leakage on the tubo seal. And that's where your issue starting. So when the oil from that seal is leaking, it will drip to your inlet port shaft motor, which is located under the tubo, which is, I know many of you have encountered this kind of issue before. And if you can unplug the inlet port shaft motor, you can see the pins are already soaked with oil, or it could be burned out. And that's the cause of that fault code normally. Bear in mind with those fault code as well, because if the fault code shows many components being short circuit to ground, for sure there will be a blown fuse. And on top of my head, it's on the right side of the engine bay, the fuse box, with fuse 105, I think 103, mostly 15 amps fuse. So in some cases, they just put the fuse on, clear the fault, bang, engine runs okay. But like what I said, you haven't rectified it correctly because you didn't find the cause why the fuse is blowing. That's what is happening, because if that motor is stuck open or stuck closed, all the vents on the intake manifold is not functioning properly. So it's either it's closed, fully closed, it's fully open, because the motor ceased or because the motor is not working anymore. And this is a modified adapter or what you call this, a seal for that intake for the tubo. And if you can see there, they put a resistor just to check if the fuse will not blown again. In some cases, some customers, because I know this is not a very easy job, they just leave the resistor there and leave the car running and the engine will light on, which is, I will not advise to do it, because you still, like what I said, you're not rectifying the cause of the complaint. So the main solution is really to remove the tubo and replace that inlet port shaft motor and rectify the oil leak from the tubo seal. And bear in mind, after you remove the intake port shaft motor, the tubo, in some cases, after putting it back, the motor plug was pinched by this bracket over there. So make sure after you put back everything on, double check the plug connector. That's not, because same thing, it will blow your fuse and it will damage again. And it will give you another fault code. So bear in mind, when you put it back all together, double check this bracket. It won't pinch the harness going to the motor. Another common issue for the 642 engine is the injector wiring, which is rubbing on the pipe. That's another thing that might give you a problem when everything is fit back together. So make sure everything is properly fitted back as per the diagram and as per the work instruction. Here is a photo of another issue with the injector for this 642 engine. As you can see, there's already a black marking around the injector area, especially on this overflow or injector backflow lines. So it could be a sign that the injector is leaking. And as far as you can see, like what I mentioned before, I never used this already been repaired. Obviously, because of the new clamp they fitted on the return line of the injector. And in some cases, you will hear like a hissing sound also in the engine area, and there will be a fuel smell. Just to give you an idea on this screenshot, if you have a, let's say, boost pressure fault or boost pressure issue, lack of power, limp mode, just to make sure that you have to read the live data on this one. So the atmospheric, the boost pressure, the intake pressure will be at least all those values will not be more than 30 HPA in relation to those three values over there. So in worst case, if you have this kind of reading, the engine won't start or the engine have a lack of power. Like what I mentioned in the first slides, you have to check for your, basically you have to check for your air leak in the system. If there's any crimp hose or split hose in the intercooler, that's the basic thing that you have to check before you proceed on another step dealing with this type of fault codes, like this one here. So intercooler connection and turbo connection. That's one of the common issue of this type of boost pressure fault or intercooler hose, or you have a limp mode or engine light on. Another thing is the seal ring. In most saloon cars, if you can see the intercooler hose leaking on that area, might recommend to replace the whole hose. Another common issue with this V6 engine is your intercooler, oil cooler leaking. Customer come in, bell housing, soaking with engine oil. First thing some of the technicians do is to remove the gearbox and replace the remain seal. After fitting it back, same thing, oil leak coming from the bell housing area. If you have this type of issue, an oil leak on the bell housing area, what I normally advise is to give it a good clean first, run the engine, and check where the oil is really coming from. In most cases, the oil will drip on the left-hand side bank because there's a hole in this area. If this is badly leaking, it will drip. There's an escape hole on that valley, and it will drip going to the starter and going to the bell housing area. If that will be the case, 100% your oil cooler is leaking. Because I know most commonly they will think is about the rear main seal because it's on the bell housing area. So that's the first thing they normally do. So remove the gearbox, put a new seal. After putting it back, same issue. So what I normally do, especially on the V6, try to clean it first, run it for a while and see where the oil is really coming from. Normally on the left-hand side, on the passenger side, bell housing area, it will drip from there. going to the starter and outside. So these are one of the example of the oil leak that I have encountered in the workshop. On that area, there will be a hole that will drip going to the bell housing area. So on this case, if you have an oil leak, or it's either an inlet manifold motor issue, I always recommend, if you have an inlet port channel motor issue, I always recommend to replace this seal also for the oil cooler, because it will be only one job. Or either if this is having an issue, you might as well replace your inlet port channel motor, because in some cases, after fitting back whichever one, let's say this one, you fit back and then you replace inlet port channel motor, and then the customer will come back, and then no power, maybe the linkage is broken. So I always recommend to advise the owner that you have to replace it at the same time, so it will save you time, and it will only be rectified in one go. And that's one of the, you can see it's really soaking with oil. That's where the valley is. And these are the types of seal ring that you will use, that you will notice when you're dealing with the intercooler, with the oil cooler parts. This is the first version of the seal, and this is the second version, and this is the third version. But before you replace it with the third version, always check with your parts department if that's the latest one. So that's the part number of the latest, and see the difference between the, I think this one is all made of plastics, and that one with steel or metal surroundings at the end of this. So it could be supersede again. So double check with your parts department what will be the latest part needed when you're replacing the seal, or you're replacing the oil cooler for the engine. So these are the 3 part number. Another common one for diesel engine issue is the black depth. This is an example of an old diesel engine 612, commonly used on a C-classes, old C-classes, and piano vans. This is one of the worst leak that I've seen when I was still in the dealership. It's been a while that the injectors are leaking, and it's not being rectified, and that's why it's blowing all the fuel coming out of the injector. And then in worst cases, if you can't remove the injector, you have to remove the whole cylinder head. So if you have a customer that's complaining about injector leak, especially on a V6 engine, which is a little bit, sometimes if it's on the cylinder number 6, quite hard, make sure that you rectify it early as possible, so it will not be on this kind of situation like this one. Okay, these are some of the latest diesel engine that you can see in a newer version of E-classes and C-classes in the market today. But so far I haven't got any issue or any problem regarding this type of engine. So if you have any reports or have encountered any complaint or any faults or any problem regarding this type of engine, just send me the report, and then I will have a look on it. And if you have any question for this one, then feel free to email me or give me a call, and I will discuss it with you. Same thing with this V8 diesel engine, which is commonly used in a GL, big SUVs. So far, not very common complaint that I have received. There are some regarding airflow sensor, but not as much as like the one on the old V6 engine. So if you have any questions or any clarification or any complaint or any customer complaint regarding this engine, just send me a report, and then I'm happy to give you and look for the common issue on that one. So, summary for this webinar: if you have done the triple C's, which is your complaint, your cause, and your correction, for sure you will have a first fix on the first visit, and the customer will be happy, and it will be a professional fix. I think that will be the end of my webinar. And if you have any questions, the chat bar is open, and I will answer you to the best that I can. I'll have a look. Oh, there are too many questions on this one. Let me have a look on the questions. One question from Kit. Does the oil at the inlet port motor leak into the harness? If so, replacement recommended. Okay, on that V6 engine that I mentioned, I haven't seen that the oil leak will go straight to the harness. Unlike on a petrol engines, on a cam magnet fault, it will run up to the oxygen sensor plug. But so far on this V6 engine, I haven't seen any oil harness straight. The oil goes straight to the engine harness. So far, it will stop only on that, because it will stop only on that plug on the inlet port shaft motor, and up to the motor itself. Other than that, I don't see any oil or any oil ingress on either plug or any connectors on the engine bay. And another question from Kit again. Would it be advisable to use a UV tracer dye to identify these oil leaks? I haven't tried one, but there are different types of leak tester, but I haven't tried the dye yet, to be honest. If you have a good adapter for the turbo, the best way really is to have a smoke test. And in some manufacturer or some tools, they use a chemical that is they include on the, they put it on the adapter for the turbo hoses, and it will almost same like a dye, but I'm not sure if it's really a dye like the one you mentioned on your question. Is it the dye they use for the AC or the AC leak test? I'm not heard about that one yet, but normally they have some manufacturer, they use a chemical that they put on the charge system, and then it will, if there's any leak, it will go out on the or from where the air leak is coming from. But the best way really is to have a pressurized system that will adapt on your turbo side. And then if the pressure drops, then you have to make sure where the leak is coming from. But in those cases, like what I mentioned, it's always on the intercooler hoses or the seals. What else? Would be... I think that should be it. So if there are any more questions that you would like me to ask, just feel free to give me a call, and or you can email me, and then I will answer it to you by email or by a call. And yeah, again, thank you for joining my very first webinar. And then I hope to see you next time. And stay safe, and thank you again, and good afternoon.